Welcome into the DNVR Rockies Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Lyons, and joining me today on what is the first day of the offseason, not for 12 teams in and around the game of baseball, but for the Colorado Rockies. Joining me as he does frequently, Kenneth Weber of Purple Row. What's up, Kenneth?
Patrick, what's up, man? We made it. It was a grueling 162 games, but we made it.
I know there's 176 days, I think, until opening day of next year, 184, I want to say, until the Rockies have a home opener. I'm already jonesing for baseball. I wasn't at the ballpark all last week. I was sick, so sick like a dog. So I am even more jonesing. I think maybe more than normal. But we're gonna have some postseason baseball, and we'll break down this 2023 season. Let's just jump into some of the stories from the weekend that wrapped up that I thought were kind of interesting. Those retirement tales, if you will. Adam Wainwright, he did end up getting that final at-bat, had a ceremony. Yadier Molina, Albert Pujols joined him there. That was nice to see St. Louis turn out for him.
Yeah, I mean, it really feels like they should have gone out all at the same time. You know, there is that missed opportunity a little bit with Wainwright. But the fact that he is so well embraced by the fan base and the organization, I mean, they did a good job reflecting it. He got a freaking puppy and a guitar too. Like, he got a pretty good gift package on the way out. So it was kind of cool on the last day of the season, though, seeing a lot. I don't feel like we get quite this many send-offs at the same time that we did this year.
You're right. Yeah, there definitely seemed like there was a decent amount. I think, yeah, maybe it's just something that people do enjoy, and that teams are maybe embracing a little bit more, because not all the players are kind of Hall of Fame caliber guys, and we've got 5-6 years to discuss Adam Wainwright if he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer with his 200 wins. But you're right. I think that might be a new trend, and I'm definitely here for that.
It's a bit of a luck of the draw, because you have to have long tenured guys. They have to be with an organization. You can't have, the guy on his 15th organization getting his send off in his first year with Tampa Bay or something. But I think a very underrated one, and you talk about the Hall of Fame discussion, is Zach Greinke going back to Kansas City. Will he be, a Hall of Famer? Will he be, pitching next year? Nobody knows what goes on with Zach Greinke ever. But it's kind of a cool full circle with him a little bit, with Kansas City and coming back to them and giving something nice for that fan base for the end of the season when they might not have otherwise had it. So, again, I think there's just a lot of tenured guys all kind of at the same time, seeming like it might be over. And it's a bit of a freak occurrence that was cool to witness.
I did enjoy watching Greinke get the high fives. He definitely had a look on his face I don't know that I've ever seen. Like, he just had pure joy on his face, and I think he still has about maybe 5 more years. He may be coming to Colorado. Give him 5 years. He's coming.
What was the stat? He's 21 strikeouts away from 2,500 in his career, something like that. Like, there is a milestone that he could shoot for that is obtainable. So I don't know, man, if he wants to give a Jamie Moyer month out there next season just to kick off the year, the Rockies may need it.
Brandon Crawford, a guy that is not a Hall of Famer, Hall of Very Good, but still get choked up a little bit seeing him get the applause coming off the field. I was, kind of a little disappointed we didn't see Buster Posey come out to the mound maybe to make that substitution, or Madison Bumgarner. I know both of those guys really aren't doing much right now, so that would have been kind of a cool moment. I like to see that for Crawford. I don't know if he's officially announced that he's going to be retiring or not. I haven't heard anything, but I could see him, kind of calling it quits after this year.
I think the official announcement was like the Giants said that they're not going to re-sign him, kind of thing. And so a lot of people were left with, it might be the end of his career, definitely the end of the Giants, was like kind of the send-off that some people had. It would feel wrong to see Crawford elsewhere. And honestly, his numbers in the past 2 years really, or at least this year for sure, haven't really supported, him being brought on by another org in like a starting role. So it's a very, very good career, and it's a staple at an important position for a lot of championship teams and contending San Francisco teams. And it's just one of those era guys. So, as much as Rockies fans might have hated seeing Brandon Crawford because he always just came to Coors and just torched the Rockies, It's a pretty notable career. And you say Madison Bumgarner's probably not doing anything. Mason Saunders might be though, so we just don't know logistically what the scheduling was like for that one.
Very fair. Very fair. The schedule makers liked having Detroit in Detroit. And it is a final game there. His children announced him over the PA system. He did a nice thing where he said, hey, I forgot my first baseman's mitt. Okay. Spencer Torkelson gives it to him. He basically just kidnaps it, signs it, autographs all over it for Spencer Torkelson. So I thought that was a nice touch from Miguel. A guy, just another one who big smiles all over his face.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of been the full tour for Cabrera and Wainwright, especially. Those two have gotten the most attention, and we talk about the career accomplishments of everybody in this discussion. Miggy is that inner circle Hall of Famer, though. So the whole tradition of this is designed for guys like Miguel Cabrera. So you soak it up when it comes around.
He, I believe, is now the last player to be able to say you played against the Montreal Expos. I did see that somewhere along the way.
That sounds right.
Yeah, that's true. Will, hey, Rockies need to build around Nolan Jones. Absolutely. We will be getting into that here in segment 2. What was positives? What were the negatives of this season? Where can they go forward? I don't know that we're going to solve all of those problems here in 45 minutes to an hour, but keep the questions and comments coming live here in the chat on YouTube. Joey Votto, another one of those players that had his final game. Very unceremonious. It wasn't St. Louis, so okay, it wasn't at home. It wasn't the way you'd want to write it. Also, he got ejected from the game. That one, in and of itself, I think he's got to come back. He's coming back. I don't know. Maybe if he had just gone out there, tipped his cap, that would have been it. Now I feel like he may have something to prove, or just something to maybe recreate and retell the story, a redo, a do-over, if you will.
Yeah. I the second chance with Votto, I don't know. It was kind of funny watching that play out because you understood the ejection, and then you saw the way that he was interacting with the umpires, the dialogue that he was having, and there was almost like oh, this hit me, this is the final game. So it was a little elongated on the conversation and him staying on the field, not in a heated, overly blow up manner, but kind of I kind of have to be out here right now and make the most of this. I think with the position that the Reds are in right now, what Votto still provides, and just the general leadership, the same way that the Charlie Blackmon that factored into the Blackmon extension. I think Votto coming back feels like a pretty safe bet. Feels like there's still some gas left in that tank, goodwill in the organization, and a team that could use the leadership. Whether or not it happens, we're going to wait and see. But it kind of feels like one that makes a lot of sense. And then you just realize that he didn't have the proper send off. He got kicked out of the game, and that can't be the end of the legacy. So that's a little bit of icing on the cake.
You can't eject me. This is my farewell game. but farewell. Exactly. Yeah. Right there. Loving the comments. Yeah, I think that's a great comparison. The Rockies, of course, had Chris Bryant. You could throw Elias Diaz in that conversation. Daniel Bard in the bullpen, Tyler Kinley, some of those more veteran players. But the Reds, I mean, I can't think of a single veteran guy that is going to be around that long. So, I think that's even more vital for Votto to be back in that capacity. Buck Showalter will not be back. Gets a kind of no thanks on his way out. That seemed like that might have been some kind of miscommunication going on there. David Stern's now in charge, coming over from Milwaukee. Starting to hear the rumors and rumblings already, like, yeah, Craig Counsell is going to be the next manager of this team, especially because he is a free agent at the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm worried about Milwaukee, just overall, because I mean these two are obviously tied in. One, Buck Showalter in New York just don't seem to get along very well, at least on the way that he leaves those positions, and it makes a lot of sense with the Mets because with the Verlander and the Scherzer trades, there's a whole lot of blowing up that feels like might be happening with Cohen and the Mets. With Stearns, you also come in and give him the option to put together the team that he wants to. That raises a lot of questions about Pete Alonso maybe being the biggest chip that they can turn around and flip. But now with Milwaukee losing Stearns, and Counsell may follow him over there, you also have some bad will that you built up with Corbin Burns in the last arbitration hearing. and you already kind of got rid of Hader. You know, there's not there's a very definitive window that Milwaukee is in, and I'm starting to feel like you can start seeing when it's going to close here soon too. So Stearns and Council leaving, Council possibly leaving. You know, it's an interesting development that's going on with Milwaukee past this season.
Sure is. We saw also got news kind of quickly. I almost want to say like Friday, we got news that Tim Wakefield had brain cancer, and then almost immediately he did pass away. So that was a real sad one for the entire baseball community. Saw some interviews with, Jason Varitek, where it was just very raw and very like, hey, this thing just happened. What are your thoughts on a guy who's just so young? We think of people living a long life into their 70s and now really 80s, and so that's sad that the knuckleballer is no longer with us.
Yeah, it's absolutely tragic, and I think it's something that really resonated throughout the league just because it was so raw and so fresh, as you alluded to with Veritek's comment. But this is also somebody that was very well beloved. Not only um, as just a baseball player, but within the community of Boston. You know, say what you will about Boston sports and what it means to you as a fan. I don't feel like anybody really hated Tim Wakefield, and there's also just kind of a fun niche career of being a knuckleballer. That's a very exclusive club, but an amazing career from all indications, an amazing person, and just really really sad when somebody that young, has that that devastating of an occurrence.
Yeah, did win 2 World Series with Boston, 19 seasons in the majors, 200 wins. I mean, gosh, we just got done celebrating Adam Wainwright, talking about, all right, well, 200 wins is kind of now the new 300, just with the
Hmm.
way wins are handed out. And you have a guy like Tim Wakefield, who in 2011, when his career came to a close, exactly 200 wins, 4.41 ERA, but even still, just a testament for sticking around, being a part of a lot of really good teams, and is somebody that deserves to be in the conversation a lot more when we talk about the Hall of Very Goods, because those players, I think, often don't get the discussion, I think, that they should have. I do want to add one thing about Joey Votto. Reds unfortunately do come up short. Lost 100 games last year and nearly snuck into the postseason. I know a lot of Rockies fans are looking at what the Reds were able to do this year and say, hey, maybe the Rockies can do that too. Bring up a bunch of these young guys. Maybe you can catch lightning in a bottle in a lot of different ways. Joey Votto's October is not over. He will be performing in October, as he's going to voice the French narrator. He speaks French. He's Canadian, in the SpongeBob musical Youth Edition at the Children's Theater of Cincinnati in October. So Joey Votto, he's got something going on this month.
I love it. I mean, I got no notes. If you can get your starting first baseman to go out and speak a different language in a SpongeBob movie, you do it. So it's an amazing. Joey Votto is just an amazing person off the field, and it's always so fun whenever he's involved in something quirky like that. One other thing that I do want to share, it was very cool. It's very besides the point. In honor of Tim Wakefield, George Kirby threw a knuckleball in his final start against the Rangers, and it was absolutely filthy. It was like a 74-mile-an-hour knuckleball on Corey Seager that he missed by almost a foot. It was absolutely disgusting. So that was impressive to see him pull that, out of his bag, out of nowhere, just in honor of Wakefield. He did turn around and say that on Pitching Ninja, I think it was on Twitter. So kind of cool thing to see.
I saw the knuckleball. Didn't know that it was for Tim Wakefield. Love that.
Mhm.
I love that story. Yeah, I think Rockies fans might be saying, I mean, we missed our opportunity with Justin Morneau, getting him. I'm sure he probably speaks a little bit of French there. Maybe not. I don't think everyone from Canada speaks French, but also a lot of people outside the U.S. do speak multiple languages. It's just
Mhm.
kind of not our bag. But look, you don't have to miss out when it comes to Breckenridge Distillery, the official bourbon of the Denver Broncos, the one win Denver Broncos, not the
Yeah.
loss list. The one win Denver Broncos. Look, Breckenridge Distillery, widely known for their blended whiskey, a high rye mash, American style whiskey. Right now, all you got to do, you're going to win 2 tickets to the Breckenridge Bourbon Whiskey Suite for the Broncos and Chargers game at the end of the year, December 31st. All you got to do is post your favorite Broncos photo to Instagram or Facebook and use hashtag Broncos Bourbon by the end of November, because on December 1st, they're going to narrow it down to 10 candidates. Fan vote goes on for a week. All you got to do, enter at BreckenridgeDistillery.com/bourbon of the Broncos. They're at all of our tailgates. We got one coming up next weekend. DNVR bar watch parties. They're there. You can get their products in all 50 states. Shop your local retailer or visit BreckenridgeDistillery.com for home delivery of award-winning Breckenridge spirits at Pray Anywhere. And at Bet365, they don't do ordinary. No, we don't do ordinary either here at DNVR, of course. They believe your bets should be epic. Every sport should be epic. So just see for yourself when you sign up today, because you'll get $365. It's Bet365. $365 in bonus bets when you bet just $1. And right now, they've got the DNVR custom bet. That's right. We've got our very own custom bets. For example, will the Broncos claim 3 divisional wins this season? There's a reason why that line is right there. Have some fun with it. Folks over at the Broncos beat still think so. Ride with DNVR. Place your bets. It's great. They've got the baseball early payout offer all throughout the playoffs as well. They've pioneered live in-game betting. It's wonderful. Must be 21 or older and physically located in Colorado. Please gamble responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. That's Bet365. Code DNVR365 when you sign up. Postseason is all set here. 4 games over the course of the next 3 days. What a bonanza. I kind of remember it last year being like, whoa, this is so much, and loving it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wish we had more than just 3 days. And I'm sure at some point in the near future, MLB will make sure that, we can have 4 games, 4 playoff games every day for, close to a week, whatever it may be. Are there any matchups? So we've got Texas at Tampa Bay. The higher seeded team will be home for all 3 games of the series. It's a best of 3. Any of these series jump out at you as saying, hey, I think I like to go one way over the other? Texas at Tampa is going to be the early game on these days. Toronto at Minnesota, Arizona at Milwaukee, and Miami at Philadelphia.
It's so hard to bet against Tampa Bay. Is the hard part. They could be matching up against anybody, and Texas is no slouch, but it's hard to pick against Tampa Bay. I feel like the one that would feel like the best bet is Philadelphia over Miami. There's enough even draws between it. I don't trust Toronto enough, and I think who knows what Arizona can do. Milwaukee, you think, should be able to take that series pretty easily, but Arizona has played good baseball all year long. So I guess Philadelphia is the one I have the most confidence in terms of just the pure matchup. Well, I think Tampa Bay is easily the best team, in of any of them in these upcoming days.
Yeah, you got to think Tampa is that lock. And Texas, although they were able to, work their way in and push into the postseason, they were so good the first half of the year and then really seem to have fallen off. And they've had so many injuries to the pitching staff. So other than Jordan Montgomery, I don't know where they're going to get their starts from. I think Arizona, look, even if they lose game 1 with Brandon Pfaadt on the hill, you still got Merrill Kelly, you still got Zach Gallen on the hill, and
Yep.
you kind of like that. But Milwaukee's been there before. This is their 5th time in 6 seasons making the postseason. So they're pretty talented. It's going to be fun. It's exciting. And then, of course, we'll inject the 2 orange clubs from the American League, Houston and Baltimore, and then LA and Atlanta. We've got a month left to go of the season. This is still great. This is still fun.
Man, as a baseball fan, I am just so on board with the Orioles doing the thing this year. It's real hard not to really be into the Orioles going from that perennial 100-loss team to a 100-win team this season, and seeing just how far they can go. And then it's hard for me to say with just how much baseball I consume. I genuinely am going to be surprised if Atlanta does not win the World Series this year. Like, that's just how highly I think of them. And so anything can happen, and we got a ton of baseball left to play. There's a very good chance that Atlanta doesn't do the thing, but they felt that good all year long. And that's maybe the highest compliment I can give a team during a season.
Yeah, Baltimore's a good jumping off spot to get into the Rockies. And Mac Entertainment, Nathan May, afternoon to y'all there in the chat over on YouTube. Go ahead and leave us a comment wherever you listen to this as a podcast. Rate us. We love those kind of things. Appreciate the feedback. Look, Orioles, they were one of, three teams this year to lose 100 games in 2021. And then 2 years later, turn around and make the postseason. I think the Orioles are probably the worst example for the Rockies to say, hey, if the Orioles did it, the Rockies can do it. Because as we know, losing 100 games in a single season isn't necessarily an indicator that you're going to immediately turn something around, because the Orioles lost 100 games in 2019 and were really bad for 3 more years. It's also part of their plan. They were tanking. They got Mike Elias from the Houston Astros, who had just experienced that, a decade prior with the Stros. So you've got a guy who has a plan in place, and an organization that has a plan in place, and we're able to figure it out. Texas maybe a little bit more so, right? They were able to actually go out and overspend perhaps, but also have a certain influx of young players to figure it out and get there. And then who's the third team? Is it the Marlins?
You could say Marlins. You could say Arizona. Arizona was
Arizona lost 100 games. Arizona lost 100 games, and they were also they weren't tanking, but they were really bad for a few years there in a row, but with a plan to try to bring it back up. And I think that's the hope, is that, okay, the Rockies have now hit bottom. Do they immediately start swimming up, or are they going to be down there for another year or so? And will it be another 100-loss season? I don't think it's out of the question.
Oh, not at all. And I think there are some genuine questions on that starting rotation heading into next season that has been a gigantic problem this season. So, I in the column I wrote today, if the Rockies don't lose Marquez and Sensatella, do they avoid 100 losses this year? Is that enough for them to maybe, make 4 games difference? Maybe, maybe not, but that's the reality of what you're facing next year too, is you're still having a depleted rotation. You're still having young guys throughout the field. It's not going to be an overly competitive roster unless they start injecting some more quality major league pitching talent at the baseline, and then also just hoping that some of the young guys come up and have an impact like a Tovar and like a Nolan Jones did this year. So they got a ways to go. I think a recent article came out that they expect to compete in 2024. That's way too big of an ask, and maybe 25 can be. 24 probably looks more like 23 than it does, those 17 and 18 years, if that's what they have in mind.
Yeah, I think with Marquez and Senzatella, maybe you do avoid like the difference in those guys' performances than who you were running out as like your number 4 or 5 starter, the Chris Flexen, the Chase Anderson, the bullpen day. I think that probably does get you 4 wins. The question that I don't think it would have changed the algorithm at all, but if they are healthy for the course of the season, would the Rockies have bothered to trade away 5 veteran players? Or would they have somehow, depending on what the record was at the deadline in the summer, would they have tried to convince themselves of like, well, hey, maybe with a good final 2 months of the season, we could at least be around 500, win 80 games, 81 games, maybe save some face in a strange way because of everything falling apart, because of these injuries, which you don't wish upon anyone. But in a strange way, I think maybe it did force the Rockies' hands to say, all right, we're going to wave the white flag. We need to do the thing that the other 29 teams all do, which is trade away expiring contracts to bring in some depth pieces in the minors, which the Rockies hadn't done for the previous 2 trade deadlines. So they needed that depth in a real major way. I think that would be a curious question to know if they'd be, in this basically same spot, 99 losses versus 103. Sure, let's just trade those veteran guys away. Or would they have somehow, duped themselves into thinking we should hold on to these guys?
It's a fair question. It's a depressing question, but it's a fair question.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I think with the way that the season started, though, too, even with Marquez and Sensatella being in the fold, I understand Sensatella was still on his way back at the time, but it was a pretty atrocious start to the season this year, too. So they kind of already saw some writing on the wall. And I believe enough that there was the plan of a profar, of a hand, understanding Crone, was in the final year of his deal, that there was always the thought of selling off these 1-year guys, assuming they're far enough out. And, hey, if they don't go down in May, sure, maybe those 3 or 4 wins happen during that time frame, and the Rockies feel a little bit better about themselves, but they're still far enough out of the playoff picture that they probably wave the white flag. That's my gut feeling about it. With a couple of these guys were just a lot of placeholders. And that's the way they were always viewed. But as Rockies fans, we've been trained to believe that, yeah, the worst case scenario actually could have happened. They could have believed that CJ Crone and, Profar in hand would have made the difference, and Moustakas or whatever. So fair question. Personally, I believe they were planning on, moving on from a couple of guys along the way, though.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going back to the start of the day on July 1st and go, all right, let's go ahead and give the Rockies 4 wins. How does that change the picture starting July 1st and go, all right, can they dupe themselves? And I'm seeing here the Rockies last in the National League and going, it was just all season long. And so we go from 33 and 51 to 37 and or 30, 37 and 47. And they're still a ways back.
9.5 out of the wild card, maybe. I don't know, but still, it's brutal. It just comes back to how miserable that start of the season was. I think that there was always that idea in mind that, hey, and that's the plan is, hey, maybe we'll get lucky. That's the playoff plan most of the time, but they were always so far out of it that I think, a Grichuk, a Crone, a Hand, they were always going to be moving on from those guys.
For sure. Yeah, it's tough here. We'll get to the positives first. Let's start there. Actually, let's start with Kind Love, the official partner of DNVR. Great way to support a local brand that supports us. We love the Kind Love cannabis. It's always a place where you can get consistent, great experience when you're getting high on Kind Love. Of course, quality, integrity, consistency, variety, and safety. It's what they're all about. Visit any of their stores down in Cherry Creek or North Denver. You mentioned DNVR. DNVR exclusive discount of 25% off all Kind Love flower pre-rolls. Your turbo joint lines are great. You could throw it right in a joint. Cigarette even too. Do what you got to do there. With that, it's fantastic. Real good little technology they've got. Visit the website at kindlove.com for their full extensive menu and online ordering. And get this, code DNVR now works for deliveries too, on top of all that good stuff. Fubo TV, sit back and relax this fall and visit Fubo TV. I'll describe my experience over the year. It's amazing. 40 plus live channels of sports, shows, movies, news. It's been great. That's how I watched the World Baseball Classic earlier this year. I was using Fubo TV to watch the Nuggets championship. I plan on doing a lot of postseason watching on Fubo TV. It's great because you can watch your local teams while you travel. We're talking thousands of hours of cloud DVR included at no extra charge. They got college football. So University of Colorado, NFL Network, Red Zones, UEFA qualifiers, you name it. Watch all your college football and NFL with Fubo. Go to www.FuboTV.com/DNVR to sign up for 15% off your first month of Fubo Pro. The positives start, they don't end, but in a way they do, because you should talk about him first and you should talk about him last. Nolan Jones. I guess it was just announced. I can't find it anywhere else, but I think it was announced on MLB Network. Nolan Jones, the National League Player of the Week. Justin Verlander got the win there in the American League. So that does mean the Rockies do bookend the season with Player of the Week award winner. CJ Crone did it with his 3 home runs in San Diego, right? The 2 on opening day to match Trevor Story. And now we've got Nolan Jones here making that last final push in the National League Rookie of the Year award voting. Nolan Jones, wow.
Seriously, that is the word to use for it. It's so fun. It's so poetic to get 2020 heading in, or the last game of the season, getting 1 home run and 1 stolen base to do it. He also did it, I think it was in something like 405 plate appearances, something like that, like the least amount of plate appearances ever in a 2020 season. And to boot, what was it, 18 outfield assists, just showing off an absolute laser.
One more. He got one
19.
on Sunday. So he had the homer, stolen base, and the outfield assist. The 3 true outcomes of Nolan Jones.
He was incredible. I mean, he easily turned into the Rockies' best player very quickly, and he just kind of never stopped. He was light years ahead of everybody else in terms of WRC plus and just statistically and with the eye test being the most lethal hitter in that lineup. Really, ever since he was given the opportunity to be in there every single day, and so it's you look for the silver linings in a 103 loss season, and Nolan Jones coming out and being an absolute monster is definitely the biggest takeaway from this season. You feel real good about what the Rockies have in that corner outfield position with what Jones showed this year.
Yeah, the Rockies probably figured on average coming out of the season, you go, all right, got the first full season from Ezequiel Tovar. Great. That's fantastic. Numbers look
Encouraging. Yeah.
very encouraging. Numbers look a lot like the numbers that Nolan Arenado put up in his rookie season when he was 22. Tovar here, this is his age 21 season. You get some contributions from some other guys, young dudes. You get Sean Bouchard back late, and you go, hey, all right, he still has something now that he's healthy. That's been positive. Brenton Doyle, we can get into those guys a little bit more, and you go, all right, we saw some things that's really positive. If you just got that, again, that's what you get, and you feel a little bit better about some things, and you maybe trick yourself into thinking that there's a lot here going forward. Throw in Nolan Jones on top of that, and it almost just changes everything. His emergence as truly an elite player is great. As Will points out in the chat, only rookie to ever have 19 or more home runs, 19 or more doubles, 19 steals, and 19 outfield assists in a single season. Nolan Jones, history of baseball. Nolan Jones, we just saw that. Nolan Jones, wow.
That's crazy. I mean, to have the first ever, and that's a great point out, Will. But I mean, it just shows just how special he was throughout the entire season, and it's a little bit of house money kind of feeling, because this was supposed to be like the Zach Veen spot this year. It was supposed to be Veen who shows up and becomes that next middle of the order or impact rookie to join alongside Tovar, and so Veen is a whole other discussion, but it still occurred with Nolan Jones. And, just as a trade for a whole, this is why the Rockies need to be more active on the market. This is somebody that they came out and acquired for another guy who had a really good year in Juan Brito. He was the Cleveland minor leaguer of the year with Baseball America, but the Rockies went out and kind of took a chance in acquiring a guy from outside the organization. Then that guy shows up and he absolutely explodes and becomes their best player. So, again, this is why everybody's been pounding the tables for so long for the Rockies to be a little bit more active in their transactions.
For sure. And I think there are so many guys, we hear it all the time with big leaguers, but I think it's true for minor leaguers too. You just need to change the scenery. Nolan Jones, again, minor league guy for a while. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why Cleveland was ready to move on of like, this prospect's getting old. School, and he's 24. He's gonna be 25 in 2023. Like, he's getting up there. He has to move off of third base. Played a little shortstop too before that, but had to move off of third base because Jose Ramirez is there. Needs to learn the outfield a little bit in a system that had a ton of outfielders. Kind of as soon as he made that position change with Bobby Bradley. Bradley Zimmer, I think is the name that I was looking for there. But a ton of those guys, and he needed to change his scenery, I think, in a lot of ways, whether he knew it or not. And Herman Marquez, did he need to change his scenery? Don't know exactly, but he got one and immediately goes out, and you get a guy who hadn't pitched above A ball, who's making his debut that season for you in 2016. So there is definitely a risk reward. I think the Rockies need to not be afraid, as you're kind of saying there. They can't be afraid to give up their own guys. I talked with someone recently that within the organization, pretty high-ranking official within the Rockies front office, saying, "Yeah, we love our guys too much." Like it's acknowledged. Like they know it. And it's not a recent thing. It's happened for a while, and so they have to kind of move on for that and be okay with that. One of the players I want to talk about that went in and pretty much did what he did last year in a really great way is Elihuris Montero. And Elihuris Montero is basically a player that you might have to worry about him going to another team and hitting 30 home runs. I want to talk about that. But here we got Burge with a super chat. We super appreciate that. Is Bill Schmidt holding any postseason media availability this year? As of right now, no, that's not going to happen. I don't believe, again, as I was under the weather, I was not at the ball. But I do have my spies. I do have some ops there that keep an eye out on things. Don't think he spoke to the media. He's always around. He's always available to media to talk to. He might not give you the most long-winded and detailed answers, but he is always available there and is not shy with giving up his time to talk. But no true media availability. We actually haven't gotten that since 2019 when Rockies were coming off of consecutive postseason appearances, and things really went sideways in 2019. And you had Jeff Bridich up there with Bud Black, Dick Monfort. Now Bridich, of course, is no longer there, but I'm hopeful that maybe next year we could possibly see something like that. I think the win-loss record might dictate that just a little bit. If we get another 100-loss season, we might not get it. But if it's less than that, I'm hopeful. Rockies are bringing back the Fan Fest in January of next year. So I'm hoping that this might be the start of them kind of reinvesting in fans in a lot of different ways and saying, reinvesting into the product and saying, hey, we want to be better on the field. And so I think this is a good way of kind of almost holding themselves accountable, just a sense.
Yeah, I think that the annual state of the franchise, nobody should be holding their breath for that to be coming back. That was their idea in 2019, and then they shied away from it after they realized the fallout of the PR side. You're right in what you said in Schmidt making himself available and always trying to give kind of candid responses and answers for it. I think there's just nothing that's going to be planned for the organization until specific events occur. So like the Blackman extension, I know there was a little bit of availability for that, but otherwise that's kind of the status quo. I think is they're just going to be around for when they want to discuss something specific that happens on transactions or moves during the off season, and otherwise it's going to be holding course until we get closer to the season.
All right, so there's a log jam over at first base. Chris Bryant, that's going to be his spot. Maybe with a good offseason, he can play a little bit of right field, which I think would obviously provide some value. But you've got Hunter Goodman, who can play first base and right field. You've got Michael Tolia, who we didn't see him around really in these final few weeks with the team. I think that's an indicator of where he stands on the 40-man roster. But he's a guy who can play first base, first base, and some right field. Charlie, DH, right field. And then, of course, Elihuris Montero can play some first base. So there's a logjam.
Sean Bouchard is in there too.
You got Sean Bouchard, of course, can play the corner outfields. And, I could see him. He came up as a second baseman, believe it or not, a second base, third baseman type. So I think he's got that glove in his bag, literally and figuratively. But one of those guys gets traded. Montero probably has the most value. Are you going to be okay with him going off onto another team and probably hitting 30 home runs with that organization?
I mean, I'm okay with rooting for guys to succeed in other teams. That's not a bad thing. When DJ leaves and he goes out and has a great season with New York, I'm not mad that DJ is having a great season. So I think it's been one of those writing on the wall situations for Montero all year long. And having Chris Bryant presumably being the full-time first baseman next season really just exacerbates the whole thing. There's always been kind of a squeeze out that feels like is occurring with Montero, based on the number of plate appearances he gets, based on the fact that every single time he has been in Albuquerque, he's proven that he is beyond Albuquerque and the PCL and AAA in general. So if they're not going to make the room to put Montero in the lineup, they have to clear Montero from the roster and bring in somebody else that can be, somebody that is going to contribute and have the position versatility to fill another need on the roster. Because right now, all it is Montero is depth. There's fodder behind it with what their plans are, and they already have 3 or 4 other guys in that conversation with them too. So I'm not huge on the idea of Tolia coming back. I think, as you mentioned, he still has some option years left. I think they've been just higher on him because he was their own internal draft pick. They like his defense quite a bit. And, it's somebody that they invested a first round pick and first round money on. So maybe he gets one more year, but Tolia is starting to kind of feel Ryan Vilade territory these days. And so that's worrisome. But when it comes to Montero, I mean, is he going to get the chance over Bouchard? More often than not, is Goodman going to come up and supplant him? There's just too many questions about Montero with too much of a ticking clock. He's provided some value with the pop that he showed this year. Feels like a good time to kind of pull a trigger on a trade.
Yeah, they almost have to at this point, and just can't be reluctant. I mean, they'd be shooting themselves in the foot in a sense, because again, you just have not enough spots for these guys, and that's what I want to get into next. Of course, after I tell you about Shady Rays, buy one, get one free. Great offer, shadyrays.com, independent sunglass company that's been doing it. 250,000 5-star reviews online. They got the lost and broken replacement policy. So if you lose or break your shades, boom, they're going to hook you up with a brand new set right there. It's fantastic. And it's really cool because they've got the Shady Rays Impact, which is a thing that they do with nonprofit partners. They build play sets for pediatric cancer patients to providing young adults with MS the outdoor adventure of a lifetime. Shady Rays, they make an impact in your community for others. So go ahead and give them some support. It helps us out. ShadyRays.com. They're also at the Park Meadows Mall, 2 or more pairs for 50% off each of those bad boys. You know, the prospects coming up, that's kind of the next thing. And there's some names and there's plenty of buzz. None of them have really advanced past AA. Sure, we got to see some of them for a week in AAA, but for the most part, we're talking about AA players who we'll just start to see next year. And maybe within the next year, it really will sort itself out. But there's really nowhere for these guys to play, at least at the start of next year. Diaz is going to be behind the plate. You got Bryan and Montero, let's say, at first. Rogers is at second. McMahon at third. Tovar at short. Nolan Jones in left. Brenton Doyle in center. In right field, can platoon Bouchard and Blackman, the righty-lefty combo. And then at DH is going to be Blackman and Bryant for some days off. Throw Hunter Goodman in the mix at that. It's pretty much filled up, which may or may not be a bad thing. What becomes kind of the modus operandi for the Rockies if they are going to avoid 100 losses, and on the more positive side of the spectrum, if they are going to bridge the gap to becoming a contender as soon as 2025, you need all of these guys to come back and provide the best of their talents. Nolan Jones needs to needs to have a 900 OPS. Again, very capable. Tovar needs to take another step forward, maybe see a little bit more home run streak out of him than just the doubles, tying Todd Helton with the franchise rookie record for doubles. You need Brendan Rodgers to be the guy that he was for 4 months of the 2022 season after he got that ugly April out of the way. You need Chris Bryant to be healthy. You need a lot of things to really go right to start to feel better about 2025. And a lot of that doesn't actually even include the prospects.
Yes, but I think how many times can you keep expecting the most out of maybe like a Ryan McMahon or a Brendan Rodgers to kind of start hitting their ceilings with it never quite coming to fruition? When does the ceiling start lowering? In your opinion, is the question I would ask with the Rockies. And then if you look at the other side of the spectrum, and this is where you can call it wishful thinking, but this is where the Orioles comparison comes into play. Is okay if you do have your Gunnar Henderson and your Jordan Westberg and your Austin Hayes and your Adley Rutschman all show up at the same time. Boom, that's the complete turnaround. And so that's also kind of what the organization is not shy about selling when they talk about the promise of the future of the org. And so we've heard about Tovar and Veen for so long and Romo, and now you have Jordan Beck, you have Yanquiel Fernandez. There's a lot of good names. There's a lot of good ball players that are on the horizon, but not everybody gets to explode all at once. And that's kind of what the Orioles have done, while also being a little bit more well-rounded on the roster around them. So I think that this is a off season where a lot of hard decisions should start getting made. Whether or not they do it, again, if you follow the Rockies long enough, you're not overly optimistic on that proposition. But if you're going to have these guys and you're going to sell the fan base on these guys being the next competitive team, you got to make sure they're able to play when they get here. Otherwise, that was the whole Eleris Montero conversation all over again. So to start clearing some room, because it feels like a Jordan Beck is going to be up next year. It feels like a Drew Romo is going to be up next year. Maybe Thompson clears his way, or Fernandez or Veen gets back on track. You see the path for 3 or 4 of these guys in their natural development reaching the majors next year. are they going to have a place to play when that time comes? That's something that management has to address.
Yeah, you're right. That's exactly it right there. That's the whole crux of it is, as you said, those guys for the Orioles, they came together at the same time. That's the window of contention. That's the whole concept of tanking. Is it's not even just losing to get better draft picks, but it's to really get your timeline so that, okay, here's what we're targeting. So we're going to put all of our resources going towards that, rather than, well, we got this guy on a so many year deal, and so we just want to keep this player around, and maybe the ceiling isn't terribly high. You have to really time it all up. You can't have all these various moving pieces that I think the Rockies do have right now. And as you said, they got some tough decisions to make so that, next year can be that time in which those young players come up. But there are so many young guys on the team right now that's like blocking their path. It was easy to see that kind of transition, I think, this year with the veterans that ended up getting shipped off. But how it happens next year, it's harder to fathom. We'll have to wait to see what happens this offseason, because maybe the Rockies are able to do that, trade some of these bats. Maybe they do revisit some kind of Brendan Rodgers trade. Like you said, Ryan McMahon, great leader, great guy to have in the clubhouse. Is that somebody that you talk around with other teams? He's not cheap. That's another element to this. Of course, I do want to mention some of the other positives. Of course, as we said, with Brendan Rodgers, missed 4 months of the season, came back in a really big way. That was awesome to see him playing as much as he was able to do. Tyler Kinley comes back. ERA, doesn't look great, but I think he did look great. Is he a closer for 2024? Bouchard's going to continue. Supposedly, we'll see if these things do fall through with winter leagues. But he might extend his season in the winter leagues, actually, with Vinny Castillas, Hermosillo, Naranjeros, the oranges.
Nice.
Lucas Gilbreth, he's going to be throwing. I think he's already throwing now, I believe. So he should be ready for the start of spring training. And Chris Bryant, he could be another one of those players that joins this group who is able to get back late in the season, contribute, and kind of restart things in a normal way to give them a normal off season. So those are definitely positives that you're going to have helping you out in 2024 that you didn't have for much of 2023.
Yeah, and there's a lot of bad luck in this season. You don't fool yourself into, or you shouldn't fool yourself into saying, oh, well, this was an 85 win team if A, B, C, D, and E didn't happen. It was still not a very competitive roster, but there was a lot of bad luck compounded into the entire thing. And it started with Brendan Rodgers right away. He always felt ahead of schedule, and he proved that was the case. And he came back and he looked legit. He took, it was some rust at the plate especially, but defensively he was strong. He was back into it. Over the final 2 weeks of the season, he started catching fire too with the bat a little bit. He put up a 348, 392, 580 line over those final 2 weeks, a 148 WRC plus. There's always been a good hitter. There's always been a great ball player. We were just deprived of it once again, in the 2023 season. So him coming back strong is a very encouraging sign. Him coming back at all, much less, starting to show much more signs of life. Bryant is a whole other conversation. At this point, he's barely put together one full season over the course of 2 years, and it hasn't been overly productive. But he's getting paid to be a producer in that lineup. So, hell or high water, that's going to be tried. And Kinley, I think, was another one that's in the Rodgers boat of it being encouraging. And the bullpen as a whole was just overly taxed for the season.
Yes.
So you take all of the results with a grain of salt, but you don't feel too bad heading into next season, at least with Kinley and Lawrence and Bard kind of being those back end options. Maybe Suter gets brought back. Gilbreth is going to be on his way back, and he was a very effective left-handed reliever. So you don't feel too bad about the bullpen, especially with some of the young guys like Hollowell coming into the conversation and being effective during the course of the year too. But a lot of these conversations have danced around the rotation, and that's still just a big glaring concern. And when we talk about the promise of the prospect side of it coming up, all of it is position player heavy. There is just no immediate reinforcements right now for this rotation. Maybe Jaden Hill shows off in the Arizona Fall League and we start feeling better, but Jaden Hill also pitched only 40 innings this year, was on just the biggest training wheels the organization could build, and 0-9 with like a 9.5 ERA. It was not a great year for Jaden Hill. And everything else is also kind of going through Tommy John surgery or just too far away. And, it's the pitching is still in need of significant reinforcement. So you can talk yourself into why things are on the rise. There are still glaring holes that still need to be addressed, though, too.
Yeah, I wrote about that. It's unlocked. It's free over at the DNVR.com. Kind of about how did the Rockies get in this position, and it really started back in 2018 is when it kind of started to fall apart, believe it or not. And one of those things that made 2023 so difficult was that starting rotation. They've been the backbone for this organization in the Bud Black era for so long, and because they went down, it actually ended up having negative implications for that bullpen. So while you might look at some numbers and you might remember some rough games and some blown saves, I think you can still say like, well, Justin Lawrence, though, there's that potential is there. We've seen it for longer stretches of time. Daniel Bard, one of the best relief seasons we've seen by a reliever in Rockies history. Just a year ago, Tyler Kinley is right there. I think Jake Bird has shown tons of promise and reliability. Lucas Gilbreth was that in his first 2 years with the Rockies. So like there are definitely guys there that in the bullpen you're going to say, all right, I think this is going to be all right. It's just the starting rotation that they've got to figure out, and that's a huge one. Huge question here from our super chat from Edward Pozo. What's going on, Edward? Appreciate you reaching out. There going to be any, other than the players, because we know the players can change all the time, some of the bigger changes can be from the manager or the GM spot. Are we going to see a move from either one of those? GM spot, we know you get a long time. You get a big leash, and so this is really only technically Schmidt's second season. Throwing his interim year, that's closer to 3. But Bud Black is an interesting one, and there's been a lot of comments that I've seen from fans and from some industry insiders and people from Purple Row even kind of making comments about Bud Black, who right off the bat, it should be said, it did his best possible job with a team that this is a 103 loss roster.
Mm-hmm.
There's no two ways about it. That's just what it was, partially because of the health. But what are your thoughts on whether or not the Rockies might need to move on from Bud Black, bring in some new blood?
I think with the first, I want everybody to understand the contract structure that Black has, which is kind of a perpetual year-to-year setup. So there's no hard deadline like there are with some other managers where, his contract is up after 2024. Will he or won't he be back? There's just an open door policy with Black and management. And then I think that an overall idea is he's the guy to see this through the toughest years. And then if winning doesn't occur when the expectations are to win more and the roster is there to win more, then a change ends up happening. And I think this is maybe where we look at like a Jim Tracy situation, let's say, or Clint Hurdle, obviously the longest tenured. There's a lot of similarities, I think, maybe between Hurdle's position and where Black is right now. Fair or unfair, there are some things that the manager always gets questioned on, and I think that there's some fair criticisms with Black's management's decisions over the course of a year, maybe. But it's like you mentioned, it's working with what tools you have, and there have been very limited tools this season, the past couple of seasons with Black. For anybody that's not fully aware, Warren Schaefer is a name that you should become very familiar with, because it does feel like somebody that the organization has plans for in the future. When that future is, though, I don't feel like it's going to be 2024, let's say, but it is somebody that I think Rockies fans should become familiar with because it is somebody who might be that natural next in line.
Yeah, it's I think the clubhouse, anytime that you're losing as many games as 103 in a season, there's going to be some stagnancy, and so you gotta keep it fresh. You gotta turn it over. But I think that's probably something that a lot of folks maybe haven't considered, is the fact that you could change managers, but 90 losses are definitely, I think, could be in the future. 90 losses could be in the future for next season. 100 again if things go poorly, whatever it may be. You might not want to stick that on your next guy, right? And you also, if you're still going to try to trade away certain pieces at the deadline next year, whatever those pieces are, Like Austin Gomber's a guy that has only 2 more years left of club control. So that might be a guy that you part ways with if you're looking at expiring contracts. At least, new managers like, whoa, hold on, like I this is my first job, right? If it's Warren Schaefer or someone else. So when the time comes, I think the clubhouse will need that changeover, to give that new group a new voice and a new leadership. But is that new leadership from the player side, is that coming anytime soon? Our guy Nate here asks in the chat, who will be the guy that breaks out next year that we could possibly be talking about? Nolan Jones. And I don't know that I have one just yet, because I think they're all almost like tied. The name that jumps out of the 3 guys that were at Hartford this year, Jordan Beck probably would be number 1 for me.
Yeah, I think Beck feels the closest. Sterling Thompson, I think it was a wrist injury that he suffered close to the All-Star break of the season. He missed a pretty significant amount of time there, but that slowed his trajectory a little bit. He was almost right there with Beck the entire way through. So I'd say Beck and Thompson are the fastest risers where they could come up. And I think Thompson might have the option to float around between third base and the outfield the same way Jones was being viewed as. So maybe a little bit more opportunity to get him in there. Not to say that Beck couldn't go to any one of the 3 outfield positions, though. So those 2 stand out the most. Maybe a dark horse is like if Aaron Schunk, let's say McMahon is out and Schunk gets his chance to crack the roster at the start of the season. It's been a slow but nice rebound for Schunk over the past couple of years, and he had a pretty decent year at AAA this year. So that's a small dark horse, but yeah, the last one to throw in there is Fernandez, maybe Yankiel. But yeah, Beck and Thompson feel like the best bets, I would say.
I kind of want to change my answer to Sterling Thompson. Here's why: because it's about the path. It's having a path to get to regular playing time with the Rockies. It's one of the reasons why I thought, Hunter Goodman's going to force his way onto this team. I think I might have said that early on in the year.
I vaguely recall
in spring training, before spring training. I think I might have said that, but I just thought, like, what, they can't refuse, they can't resist him. And so even though they drafted him as a catcher, they found a way to get him on the field, first base, right field. And so with Sterling Thompson, he's got first base and right field in his bag, and third base, and second base, and left field. So I think that increases the likelihood. It almost allows you a little bit more freedom. Whereas, you had middle infielders like Harold Castro and Alan Trejo this year. All right, now you only need one of those guys because Sterling Thompson's getting regular playing time. It could really allow you to, properly rotate and properly have platoons on this roster, because if guys can play all over the place, it allows you to mix and match really well. And instead of playing, 6 days of the week, you're playing 4 to 5 days out of the week, because you're jumping around from different spots. And all right, Brenton Doyle, he's locked in there at center field, except the day he gets off, Jones can play over in center, and then Thompson can be in left, or Bouchard's in left, Goodman's in right. Whatever it is, you have to be able to play multiple positions. And these young guys are the one. Steven in the chat saying, I'm hopeful for the future core. Next year might be tough, but it's necessary. And this offseason will be necessary to kind of figure out what the Rockies are going to do. And Kenneth, I know you're going to be back talking plenty more. We didn't really get to a ton of the negatives, which is okay.
Yeah, we have a whole offseason. We have 103 negatives to talk about this offseason. So, but hey, a good small one. Actually, when you talk about the breakout, if Hunter Goodman gets enough playing time next year, maybe. We didn't really see the best of Hunter Goodman this year, but the dude can hit. So that's a one to keep an eye on too. I'll say that.
Yeah. No, it's going to be an exciting offseason, as it is always, because we're talking baseball, which we love. Rockies are there too. We love them. So we want to see them do well, make the right move. So we'll be giving our feedback on that all over the place. Kenneth, go ahead and plug away where folks can check all your good stuff at.
Yep, over at Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at KW1988. And then you can find me over at Purple Row every Monday, doing my rock piles and doing the Pebble Report.
Tons of unlocked articles over at the DNVR.com, at DNVR_Rockies on Twitter. At Patrick D. Lyons is where I can be found. Kenneth, appreciate you giving us the momentum. But as we say here in the baseball podcast world, your momentum is only as good as your next show. So it's going to be a great one tomorrow at noon right here on the DNVR Sports Channel live on YouTube.